Thank you very much, Sophie. Let me just share my screen and hopefully you can all see that now. So, as Sophie said, I'm based in Mexico City. It's quite early here at the moment, or late, depending on your point of view. It's 2:30, 2:50 in the morning. What I'm going to be talking about is this idea of new ways of continuing professional development for teachers, new ways of teaching. And without further ado, let me introduce you to this. I'll put this link in the chat, but what I'll be doing is asking you as we go along to actually interact with me and share some of your own thoughts and ideas, reflecting on your own journey through continuing professional development, CPD, as I do the same. And I'll be looking at how technology is affected and is affecting me and my own CPD, and also the CPD of the teachers that I work with. So the first question basically is one that I want to find out from you the answer to. Um, who are you? What's your context? Where do you work? Do you work as a teacher in public education, in the private sector, as a teacher trainer, etc.? And you don't have to wait to go on to the other questions here, and I'll be having a look at the answers that you put in a little while. So please go ahead and start answering my questions as we start moving through uh, the session. Now, what is continuing professional development? Well, I've used this quotation. There are many quotations, but this is one that we use in the British Council where I work. It's basically a planned, continuous, and lifelong process where you can develop your personal and professional qualities, improve your knowledge, skills, and practice to improve your professional autonomy, performance in the classroom, and development of your organization and learners. So that's one that covers, I think, a lot of different things. And let's look at my particular journey, as I said, through CPD. So I've broken this down into four sections. First, my interaction with CPD and technology as an English language teacher, then as a senior teacher and a teacher association coordinator, then a project manager, and then finally as an English for Educational Systems lead, which is my current role. So, what about you? What is CPD for you? Now, CPD can be many different things. For me, uh, as a an English language teacher, for example, it was very much about what my organization was providing for me when I started my career. What is it for you? So if you want to have a quick look at that, and let me just see if anyone has started answering. Uh, Let me see if I can see this. There we go. So we have people answering where they're from. Most people, of course, from Australia. We have someone from Vietnam, and I'm from Mexico there. Um, how about CPD? CPD is, for most of you, decided by you and the other teachers, which is interesting, rather than actually, the next popular answer is something you do unsupported, which again is quite an interesting thing. I think many teachers now do CPD unsupported by their institution. Okay, now starting out as a teacher, I think people quickly realise that the initial training course that you do is only start of the journey. And for me, what became very useful as a teacher was a framework. So a framework such as this one that the British Council has, that you can use to organise your CPD, can be a very valuable thing. There are lots of them. This is just the one that I'm most familiar with. And this one on the left is for teachers and the one on the right for teacher educators. The one on the left has 12 professional practices, and the idea is that you would select, you would decide which one on these 12 practices where you are in your journey, starting with awareness in the outer rim, if you like, of this circle, and then the closer you move next to the core, the more integrated your CPD is. And this is quite an effective tool for self-reflection, really, if you like. And this became very useful for me when I started my journey. Now, one of the things that you do when you use a framework as an individual teacher, as I think it's very interesting, but you do realize that a lot of the research that is out there, if you have the chance and time to actually to read some of it, that's fine. But a lot of the time, you find that a lot of the research is actually not very related to what you do in the classroom, which can be problematic. And I think this has become more and more problematic. So I think one of the things that is useful is to find a way of accessing this research in other ways. Some types of research, for example, it's more accessible to teachers. One such research is exploratory action research. And one of the things that this can help you with is, as a teacher, to actually identify some of the things that you're doing in the classroom and how effective they are. Using this type of research, I think, which I started doing in the classroom, I started getting some feedback on some of the technology that I was using with learners. And it's a way of being able to very quickly try something out and then get an idea of how useful it is for the students themselves. And one way of being able to implement this is through using some of the experiences of other teachers. So exploratory action research, for example, gives you another framework to be able to put into practice some of the research questions that are you can use to find out more about your students and your learning context. I'm running through this quite quickly because of the time restrictions, and I hope that that a lot of what I say will be useful. I'm moving on to something else now, but first of all, if you can tell me a little bit about your experience with frameworks or the CPDs that you use. When I moved on to becoming a senior teacher and working as a teacher association coordinator, and excuse the cat, by the way, it's trying to enter the picture. One of the things that I did was I became involved in presenting and preparing CPD for other people. And the most interesting form of CPD that I was involved in back then, which has been given this name, teacher activity groups, is quite an interesting concept, I think, for teachers to be aware of, and anyone in particular who is organising CPD for other teachers to be aware of as well. Now, basically, what it is, it's all about teachers coming together, and rather than teachers sitting and watching either online or face to face someone present, as I'm doing now, about a particular subject, it's about teachers splitting off into groups around an area of interest and meeting regularly, once a month, for example, or even more frequently if they can, in order to help each other increase their knowledge and skills. It's almost like splitting off into small communities of practice, if you like. And I think the interesting thing about doing this is when it's structured as well. I think these frameworks or structures to help you as a teacher or groups of teachers to actually develop are very interesting. And there are ideas, for example, in this book that I have shared on the screen to help you get started with that. I'm going to skip this one and move on to this. I think one of the reasons why continuing professional development is much better than one-off CPD is because of this forgetting curve. So I think something that happens very quickly is that a lot of the input that you receive in one session can be quickly forgotten. And I think that's why something that allows you, that technology does, to allow you to revisit training sessions and watch recordings, for example, can be very useful, especially as you can pause and rewind and go back and watch the video recordings afterwards. What about online CPD? Now, I imagine as you're all here online for this event, that you have done quite a lot of online CPD. But what would be quite interesting to hear about is if your experience has particularly improved, for example, or changed. Have you changed your opinion about something? Or have you decided you're definitely going to adopt something that you've seen these last few days, for example? Let's have a quick look at what you're saying about that. So people's approach to CPD, most people here today do what they feel like at the moment. Let's see how they feel about CPD. It's about learning, it's about sharing, it's essential. CPD is invaluable, so everybody's pretty much bought into the idea of CPD. And how much CPD online? Well, not surprisingly, 76% of everyone here today engages a lot with online with CPD, which would be expected. But actually, it's always surprising when I present this type of information and ask people at other types of events and conferences, it's much lower. And I would expect to have seen a lot less people saying that they frequently engage with CPD online. Right. Over to the next part of my own journey was when I became a project manager. And I became a project manager and moved to Uruguay to work on a large project to teach children via video conferencing. My perspective of CPD changed a lot then. What marked the main differences, I think, was moving from the private sector, where I was teaching students who were paying to have English classes, or in organizations where people pay to have English classes, to public sector education. And that increased my responsibility to providing a CPD for hundreds of teachers as well. And in particular, teachers who are teaching online. One of the things that we found quite interesting when doing this was actually researching what teachers teaching online, and this is a project that was been running from 2013, really needed to know what the difference was between teachers working online and teachers working face-to-face, what kind of skills they needed and how best to provide CPD for them. This is something I've been doing since then quite a lot. And I think the frameworks that I mentioned before, when you have large numbers of teachers, become very important as well. This became a very important tool for me in my role of trying to structure CPD and make it sensible for the teachers that I was managing. And one of the things we did was look at, with a colleague I worked with on the project, we looked at CPD and skills for remote teaching and what were necessary. I think it's quite interesting, the findings that we did after observations and surveys of many teachers showed us that actually the ability to teach well was much more important than the ability to teach online or the experience to teach online. So that most teachers would be able to learn how to teach remotely, but actually teaching them how to teach well, in particular teach young learners well, was going to take a lot more time. So long as the teacher was at least not afraid of technology, it was something that we were able to do. So that affected our recruitment. We would recruit teachers with experience of teaching young learners, and who weren't afraid of technology, rather than the other way around, trying to take teachers who were very savvy using technology and trying to get them to implement good methodology or strategies for teaching young learners. I think the other thing we did, of course, the other difference was the ability of teachers use a variety of technologies in the classroom. Now, I think when it comes to this idea of online and teaching and technology, I think if you are a teacher like myself and like many of you, I think, who are very interested in using technology with learners, I think it's very important not to become seduced by the technology. And here is a quotation from the educator Michael Fullen about that, in that the technology can seduce you, and using something that appears to be a lot of fun and very elegant, it can give you the false sense that your learners are learning, rather than just playing with technology. And that's the big trap I think all of us need to keep an eye on. I myself have fallen into that trap on more than one occasion, and it's always important to put the pedagogy first, I think, because of that. Right. How has digital or online CPD actually changed you? You've already answered this question, I think. So I'll talk a little bit about how it seems to have changed me, and what kind of things it's made possible for a lot of teachers that I've worked with, or that I work with. One of the things I think is particularly interesting is this idea of the MOOCs, so the massively online open courses. And I don't know how many of you have had the chance to look at MOOCs recently, but MOOCs have changed a lot since they were first launched. And one of the things I particularly like is to look at how these types of courses have changed as far as learning design is concerned. So if you want now an example of how best to actually design a course for teachers to ensure that they are engaged, motivated, and learn very well, you could do a lot worse than look at some of the design of the courses that are available. Again, I've focused on one which I think is a particularly interesting set of courses. The British Council use these providers, FutureLearn, for their courses as well. One of the things I find is quite interesting that you can draw out from what these courses offer teachers is the very clear interface. The short videos, there are not videos that last longer than about 3 to 5 minutes on these courses. The interaction, there's always a way that you can interact with the content, either it be in a forum or in some other way, the drag and drop exercises, etc. You always see what progress you're making. There are lots of infographics. There are summaries of what you're learning and what it is. And then quite interesting is that there's always a way of diving deeper down the rabbit hole. So you can always get access via links to research and further information. The way that does very cleverly gives anyone taking this course a kind of snapshot of how they can learn the basics, and they can move very quickly through these, save their progress as they go. So you can do as little as about 5 minutes or as long as you like. So it is something teachers can do in their coffee breaks even, which makes it very accessible and very useful to as a form of CPD. Now, in my latest role as English for Educational Systems lead, one of the things I've had to do is take responsibility for groups of people working on projects, working with lots of other teachers. And that has meant that in the last 2.5 years, I've been working with teachers who are working with groups of teachers or teacher trainers. And it means that I have to very quickly look at the kind of things that those groups of teachers are actually proposing in specific countries in the Americas, which include some of the countries that are mentioned here. And so because of that, the access via the internet to lots of information, reports, research, etc., has been invaluable for me. And being able to quickly look at these and see how relevant they are to the situation is important. One of the things I've found that come out of all of these reports that look at teachers and what they need is that professional development based on, as it says in this report, the Tallis report, professional development based on collaboration and collaborative approaches to teaching is the one that has the most impact. So I think teachers coming together and working together is something that is really of great value. And I would like to ask you another question about your own approach to CPD and what has it been, what has the focus been in the last year or so in particular, as it has changed for so many of us. So let me just have a quick look. Before the pandemic, some of you, 22% of you, saying you didn't do much, if any, online CPD. I think this is one of the things that is going to have a long-lasting effect, because I know teachers who did not do much online CPD, who had their first taste of it because of the schools closures during the pandemic. And I think it will be very, very interesting to see just how CPD, for example, changes as teaching does as well. And here we have some of you saying what you've been doing: survival, adaptation to a new context, lots of mental health focus for me and my students. That's an interesting comment. I think that's something that people have started to realize, in particular with the lack of human contact. We've had a lot of mental health problems, and this well-being is quite interesting. And as a follow-on to that, actually, I think one of the things that I've done over the last during this school closures is we commissioned some research about what was required for this new type of teaching. If we're going to be teaching students at home, what do teachers need? What kind of support do they need? What CPD do they need? And again, looking again at the skills teachers need for the remote teaching, and also how they coped in different countries with the schools closures. And well-being was definitely something that was highlighted as being very, very important. I think one of the other things that we found was that the CPD that teachers ended up doing and the support they ended up giving themselves, 51%, for example, in this research report that we undertook, actually said that it was their own colleagues, their peers, that they learned from the most. We found a lot of teachers in a lot of countries were actually getting together informally, not through platforms or any formal way that the schools or even Ministry of Education in those countries were actually providing for them, but informally, in little groups, in their own schools, using platforms that were freely available, using tools that were freely available, that they had access to, and learning from each other. And a lot of teachers ended up learning about how to use these tools, to teach online, and then teaching their colleagues. And this was one of the things that was highlighted as being one of the most crucial things as far as CPD is concerned for teachers. So lagging behind were the schools and the ministries and other organisations actually providing a more formal sort of way of teachers learning. And I think the other thing that came out of this as well was that teachers' associations and unions have become a major resource for teacher education and professional support during the COVID pandemic. So I would expect to see a surge in interest in joining teacher associations from that as well. And I think I'm running out of time, so I would just like to say very much thank you for this. It's been quite a rapid look at these. You can actually download my slides from SlideShare, which you can see the address there on the screen, slideshare.net/BCG Stanley. Let's have a quick look at the at the latest input from Mentimeter. You can also revisit this as well, and you can put in your email address so you get actually sent at the end of this presentation. You get sent the results, and that is it. Now I'm going to have a quick look at the questions because I haven't addressed those, just to make sure that there's nothing there. Okay, there aren't any questions, so I'm going to just say thank you very much and finish there. Thank you.